There was a call issued a few days ago by a group called the Canada Peace and Justice Network, which brings together a growing range of anti-war groups, groups which are concerned about the direction of this country's foreign policy, about the threat to the earth from the growth of militarism and war. We have copies of their statement. They called for Canadian participation in the Global Day of Anti-War Action, which is today, Sunday, March the 6th. There are similar actions in about 20 Canadian cities. The list is growing. It's an impressive list on very short notice. So I want to thank all of you for coming out, even though you may not have heard of this until a day or two ago. We want to make very clear, first of all, that we are, of course, in solidarity with all victims of war, with every such tragedy. Today, the people of Ukraine who are suffering from a military invasion that was not their fault. And we want that war to end as soon as possible. But when we say this, we also remind ourselves, and we have some signs from previous anti-war rallies, we remind ourselves that the people of Yemen are still suffering from bombardment by a government which is backed by Canada. The people of Palestine are still suffering from the occupation by the Israeli apartheid regime. The people of Cuba are still suffering from the sanctions that U.S. imperialism has. Canada is one of the governments that has supported NATO's effort to push eastward, creating a difficult security situation for Russia. So we live in complicated times, friends. We want an end to this war as soon as possible. We want an immediate ceasefire. We want the removal of all troops from Ukraine. We want a negotiated political settlement of the dispute there in the interests of all people, so that we can be sure that we have a secure future. We don't want actions that can increase the danger of nuclear war. So this is why we're all here today.
I'm Barbara Waldern. I'm with the International League of People's Struggle. It's an international organization that has anti-imperialist perspective. And we're trying to bring more people together and discuss and figure out what's going on. And from that, decide what kind of positions, attitude we have to the crisis, to the problems of the people, and take action to eventually build a better world. So we're all, even though the situation in each country is different, we have different types of scenarios going on, we can find our common points and unite together. We're trying to build a broad, united people's movement. So the ILPS, like a lot of our organizations, are trying to reach out beyond the anti-imperialist movement, as well as within the anti-imperialist movement, and organize locally and internationally. We have to get the people to stand up together for life, for social justice, and to oppose aggression, domination, and fascism. The right is rising. Imperialism is in crisis. The rivalries are increasing. They're sowing divisions, and many wars are going on. So a lot of us have foreseen the kind of crisis that's in the Ukraine going on as these regional conflicts, militarization increases again and again. But the people are coming together. We're regrouping these days, but we do need to have a lot of conversation, a lot of research, and decide what our common positions are. And it's really quite an accomplishment that today is a global day of action, and that ILPS supports the whole week of actions, March 1st to March 6th. Many organizations are making declarations. It doesn't mean that we all agree. We all have the same understanding about what's going on, the same explanation for the crisis, or support any entity, or do not support any entity, some entity to the same degree. No, but we can find our commonality. And the main thing is that war is not a solution, right? So we have to come and we have to find out who is responsible for it and oppose the war. So we're opposing all the parties. This network, the ILPS, supports this action. Canadian Peace Congress and others who are here oppose all the parties involved in the militarization, in the funding, the aid to military activity, to NATO, congregating there and amassing their weapons, building more bases, etc. And we also hold Russia account because there's no justification for the invasion, for the aggression against the Ukrainian people. And the Ukrainian state itself has been having the civil war, attacking the people who have decided to go independent paths. And we don't hear much about that, but that is going on. And we have to call them all to account. They're all disregarding agreements made when the US-backed coup took place in 2014. They're disregarding the Minsk agreement, which was supposed to settle this, allow these territories to have autonomy and to have a certain democratic process. But there are a lot of big interests involved, you know, economic interests, the oil trade, the arms trade, the trade routes are at stake, spheres of influence, markets, and so on.
Today we're joining rallies, global rallies, all over the world in 124 different sites around the world. All of us calling for an end to war. We strongly oppose the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but we also oppose the involvement of the Canadian government in war. The only victors of war and the invasion of the Ukraine are the wealthy and the military-industrial complex. We want peace. Will you join me? We want peace.
We want peace. We want peace. We want peace. We want peace. We want peace.
And we're standing with the people in Ukraine and in Russia and others around the world who are standing for peace today. And no more spending on war that doesn't profit anyone but the military-industrial complex. Wars destroy cities, communities, homes, and hit women, youth, seniors, and those who are racialized, the LGBTQ community, and the most vulnerable, including soldiers. We're already hearing and seeing live discrimination of racialized people trying to leave the Ukraine, and learning of traffickers meeting women at the borders, offering them homes, rapes of women by soldiers. Wars are creating millions more refugees and significantly massive more pollution, driving us closer and closer to total disaster. Engaging in war is bankrupting our economies desperately needed to fight climate change and social sustainability around the world. The Canadian government is pouring 1/3 of our national budget into defense. 1/3. That's 1/3 of every department that could be used for jobs, housing, transit, childcare, the TRC and Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls recommendations, and global aid. We want peace. We want peace.
We want peace. We want peace. We want peace. We want peace.
Wilf calls on Canada to stop all arms exports and end sanctions which only hurt people.
Yes.
We call on Canada to end Operation Unifer and Operation Reassurance. See the Wilf new document opposing the proposed Canadian government purchase of 88 jets for the cost of $17 billion and in the long term about $50 billion more. We need to speak up and oppose warmongering and get serious about climate change. Canada could take a new role in the world as a peacekeeper and not hold on to the coattails of the United States. We call on all parties to ensure respect for human rights, women's rights, and international humanitarian law.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Whenever we hear from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, it's a great reminder. This is an organization that in the darkest days of World War I, over 100 years ago, and it was almost impossible to speak out against that imperialist slaughter. The Women's International League in Peace and Freedom was one of the first groups to have the courage to stand up against that war. And here they are, over a century later, standing strong, against the atrocities that are going on in our world today. There's a couple of groups that couldn't be here and sent messages.
I'm Natasha Hill, part of the Vancouver Peace Council, also local representative to the Canadian Peace Congress. Numerous injustices have unfolded from the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, and in particular upon those most vulnerable. Non-white refugees trying to flee from war have faced discrimination by being barred access to trains and denied entry across Polish borders and left exposed to the winter elements with nothing in the way of support. The discourse adopted by Western reporters when referring to Ukraine and its predominantly white refugees as being distinctly civilized serves further that we're here trying to build an anti-war movement, and that means no to NATO, no to sanctions, no to nuclear brinkmanship. Canada is culpable to this unfolding crisis, but can seek to make amends by amending its participation in operations Unifear and Reassurance, bringing its soldiers from abroad back home.
No war in Ukraine! 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 No war in Ukraine!
No to NATO!
No to NATO!
On Twitter, though.
NATO!
No to NATO!
No to NATO!
No to NATO!
Ceasefire!
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 Negotiations, not a military solution.
Negotiations, not military solutions.
Negotiations, not a military solution.